Hello, everyone, and welcome back to One Soccer. I am your host for today, Josh Deming, and I am joined by my colleague, Alex Gangue-Ruzic. And today, we're going to break down the biggest storylines surrounding each CPL club, and we're going to start with the defending champs, Forge FC. So, Alex, Forge, they're serial winners. We know this. So, the big storyline for me is more of the same. They didn't do a ton to their roster this offseason, but they did bring in Manjikar James, who I think is going to be a big player for them. And I also want to maybe highlight a little bit of Jordan Hamilton, because I think he could be in for a sneaky good season.
Yeah, Forge, the three-time champions out of 4 years. They made the final in the other year. This is what they do. It's win. And what's scary is that last year they arguably had their best team. They didn't finish first in the regular season, but they kind of cruised along. And then when it came playoffs, they just turned it up and just went after it. And especially in that final against Ottawa. And what's scary is that they pretty much retained that entire team. Bar Daniel Crutzen, who, explored opportunities elsewhere. And like Johnny Grant, for the most part, a lot of their core is back. The fact that they lost Crutzen and they bring in a 29-year-old Canadian men's national team. Yeah, it's maybe been a few years since Manjikar James has been on the men's national team, but he's still, one of the players on the extended depth chart. Slot him right in at center back, and that's all they needed, because you look at their depth up front. It's Ruben Specia, still young. He could still have it hit another level this year, and if not, right behind him, you got Taron Campbell, you got Jordan Hamilton. And the fact that Jordan Hamilton is like a piece for them, that's, if he hits, they're doing great. If not, he could literally play 10 minutes and it wouldn't cause a worry. And you add in that they brought back Kyle Becker, Noah Jensen could grow a bunch. You got Alessandro Hojabapour, who could be quietly one of the best midfielders of the year. You could just go through the list with Fords. They're deep at all positions. They look good. It's a scary team.
It is a scary team, and it's funny because I've seen a couple projected starting 11s, and Hamilton and Campbell are not in it. Becker's in it, obviously. Borges obviously is going to have a big season, so it's just crazy the depth that they still have, despite only really bringing in Manjikar James, who is the perfect type of replacement. So again, it's a lot of the same of Forge. You kind of know what you're going to expect from them, and I'm expecting probably another big season again. But now we're going to shift things over to Cavalry. Now, this is an interesting one for me because we're talking about the growing depth in this league, and a lot of different clubs that we're going to talk about have brought in a lot of key pieces. Cavalry might have that catch up to them this season. They've always been pretty much a top contender, but is the depth actually going to catch up this season and punish them because they had some key players leave and they replace them maybe a little bit more strategically instead of maybe like for like? So do you think that the depth could catch up to Cavalry this season?
It could, and I think this is why this is arguably Cavalry's biggest year, because it feels like the pressure is the highest after just continually to do so well in the regular season, then continuing to fall up short in the playoffs. And I think the fact that they maybe didn't make any huge signings, say like some good depth pieces. I think Cal Montgomery also is, amongst the best signings in terms of Canadians coming into the league. But you look at some of the departures, Karifa Yao, for example, Bradley Vliet. These are some David Norman Jr., some tough holes to fill. So it's going to be a lot on Tommy Wilden Jr., who's a great coach, and he's going to get a lot out of this group. And I think that's something where you can look at the signings and not worry, because, Tommy Wilden Jr. has this habit of just pulling players out of the sky, and I think he'll do that. And, but it's going to be a lot of responsibility on him, Marco Carducci, Ali Musi, to really carry this team to the heights that people are expecting. But, in a transition year, can they hit those same heights?
And Tommy has talked about really being excited to play with Montgomery and have him play under him. And I'm really excited to see how he grows, because I do think that will probably be the biggest key piece that they brought in. And if he can get that type of form that we know that Tommy's got out of some of his other players, Montgomery could be in for a massive season. All right, Alex, the next club we are going to take a look at is York United. And this is a club I think can do big things this season. I was able to cover them a lot last year, and it was a lot of fun watching them, especially when Mo returned to the league. But this year, they've added a lot of key pieces that know the league very, very well. Ganyan Lapure is a big one for me. You also have Atakubi, Baldissimo, you got Wright, and then you even went out and brought in a player like Bahia, who I think could be a real project for them. I think this is a player that has a lot to give. I just like everything that they did. How serious should other clubs take them this year?
Yeah, it feels like York could really be poised to take just a huge step forward this year, and I think that's key. It's the second year under Martin Nash, who really spent a lot of last year just putting these sorts of key philosophies in place, and I think we really got a glimpse of Nash ball, so to speak, at the end of last year when they really clicked under Mobabuli. And what's scary is that it feels like they replaced a lot of their key departures. You have to remember in the last year they got gutted. Lowell Wright, Diadine Abzi, Isaiah Johnston, Dominic Zator, Krisnovich Insa. Those are all key players to lose, but they've done well to replace them. I think Gagnon Lapare, Adekugbe, that could be, one of the best midfield duos in the league. And there's a lot of other pieces you could slot in behind that. Backline, lots of good options there. Can Roger Thompson finally stay healthy? Nikos Giantsopoulos in goal. He also impressed a lot last year. There's just a lot of good pieces across the board, and they're still a very young team, but it feels like they added some veteran pieces that were missing. And, you add in the fact that Ronan Krat could also just quietly come back depending on how his loan ends with Werder Bremen, or he's playing with their second team. That could be another big boost because, of course, Di Rosario and Babuli will be a fun duo to watch up front right as well. And you could throw a Krat in that mix. It's just scary to see the depth they have to go along with the talent. It feels like York always had the talent. But now you look across the roster, there's just names bursting out of every hole. I didn't even mention Max Ferrari, for example, is coming back from an injury as well.
Yeah, honestly, and we're going to talk about some clubs who did not do a ton, but York went to town this offseason. It was crazy to see what they were able to do. But yeah, I'm excited to see if they're going to still go under that 4-2-3-1. When that system kind of came in play and Babuli went through the middle and Diro up front, those two just clicked, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And now, like you said, the pieces are there to make this potentially a big season for them. But now we're going to move on to another club that I believe could be in for another big season because, they usually do. If you told me one thing that Pacific was missing last season when Diaz moved on, it was a proven goal scorer. But guess what, Alex? They went out and they got one. Easton Ongaro is coming back. How does this maybe shift the needle for Pacific of being a team that everyone should be worried about playing?
I mean, I think this is probably the best signing in the league. I think you could argue because, look, Forge didn't need Mandrakar James. That's just a nice gravy. You look at Pacific, they were very good last year. They had one of the best number 9s. That number 9 left, and their offense just fell apart. And in the playoffs, they were competitive. They went toe-to-toe with Ottawa. It's just, if they could only have a guy who could put in the goals in the key moments when they were pushing and just were knocking on that door. I think of that second leg where they just hit the post, the crossbar. It was just throwing something. They would have taken up the ball with their hands and thrown it in the net if they could have. And the fact that they're all right, let's just go get the 6'7" freak of nature that is Easton Ongaro, who can score with his feet, right, left, can score with his head. Looked very good for Whitecaps too. And, I wondered if maybe he could have got more of a look with the first team, but maybe age and just other factors got in his way. Well, the fact that, Pacific get a guy who scored a lot of goals on some, okay, average Edmonton teams in the first few years of the league, went to Romania. That's just perfect. They needed a number 9 like that. And the fact that they got someone who's familiar with the league, who's Canadian, who's still relatively young, I say, 24, 25, could still, lot room to grow given, his unique profile. That's a match made in heaven, really, for Pacific, who is a team that still very solid elsewhere on the pitch. Yeah, they lost Marco Bustos, but for the most part, they retained key players like Manny Aparicio. They upgraded a few other positions. The fact that Ongaro can just slot in and be the goal scorer they need, perfect move.
No, Ongaro, and it's interesting because I think this could be a real, I'm not going to say bounce back season, but he's been on the move quite a bit after finding his legs at the CPL level, scoring with Edmonton, going to Europe where maybe didn't go exactly to plan, but to get that experience is so important to a player to come back and, like you said, did good things with Vancouver Whitecaps too. And now it's time really for him to maybe settle in a little bit, find a home here and score some goals because this is a club that can absolutely use his services. So definitely a goal scorer that will be competing for the top of the league. But now we're going to go on to a team that is missing their top goal scorer, and that is Morelli, who is still going to be out for probably half the season or so. And without him at the beginning, yes, they brought in some young players, but is this too young of a side right now, Alex? Now, I know that you mentioned to me a little bit earlier you're worried about that. Obviously, they brought in Fillion, who's going to be a fantastic keeper for them. But when Morelli is out right now for these first few months of the season, is it going to be very difficult for them to get the results they need to push for playoffs later in the season? So is it just the fact that this is too young of a club, or you think they could be a big surprise?
It's going to be tough because I think it's just going to be too young too soon. I think youth is not a problem. I think Halifax last year looked their best when they played their kids. And I think the fact that they retained a lot of those pieces is key. But the fact that you do throw in a new coach in Patrice Gazar, making the move over from Von Azuri, you add in that there's some new faces they've thrown into that. The fact that they're just so young across the board, the fact that their attack struggled last year and they lost Sam Salter. And Joao Morelli, who they thought would be back, is going to at least miss half the year. There's just the mix of inexperience and that lack of that question of where the goal is going to come from. You just look at how a lot of the other teams improved across the board. It feels like it just could be too young too soon. I think when this team clicks, they have a lot of potential. Like they got some pieces to watch out for: Christian Campagna, Mo Omar, Zachary Fernandez. Those are some good. That's a good core of players that just at the back you can go up through the middle as well. So I think it's a team that high upside. It just feels like new coach, young team. Maybe this is a team that is really good in 2024, for example. Maybe they finish this year strong and look ahead, and that, that'd be a good case scenario for Halifax, because one thing they lacked over the first few years was a bit of vision on the field. It feels like they've got that with this young team that they can finally have grow together.
I think if they have a season similar to York's last year, that would be good for them, because obviously York was a little bit all over the place, but they kind of got it together at the end, and they got it together when their star man returned to this league. Well, Morelli's going to kind of be similar. This young team is going to have an opportunity to learn from this league, and they're going to have a league MVP returning, and maybe they have a very strong end of the season and build, because like I said, I'm very excited for York this year. I think that they have the pieces, and maybe, like you said, Halifax can get a lot of these players, just get familiar with their league, get their feet wet, and then have a player with that pedigree coming in and kind of like shaping up the rest of their year. But maybe they'll surprise us. Maybe this will be a playoff team from the very beginning. But a team that will be at least I think it will be a playoff team from the very beginning is Atletico Ottawa. Obviously, they had a fantastic season last year, but they're, again, like all the clubs that we've been talking about, there are changes. Valour has moved on, Brian Wright as well. They brought in Sam Salter from Halifax, one of the biggest moves in CPL history. When you want to talk about those type of players who, like I mentioned, are leaving, is it going to be up to Salter to basically find the back of the net? Is he going to be that guy to go into a very good Atletico Ottawa side under a great manager? But can he do it? Can he make that transition over to Ottawa and find the back of the net ASAP?
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of pressure on his shoulders, especially given that he carries that tag. The first intra-league transfer, players are going to be looking like, look, Ottawa saw a player that they wanted, went after him. That's a sign of intent. And I think he's going to have to play a big role, because Ottawa, they kept a lot of their back line. People thought maybe Diego Espejo could have gone, Nathan Ingham, even Ali Bass in the midfield. They're all back. Like, the spine of that team is fantastic. We saw how good they were last year. No worries there. But even last year, despite all their success, there was a lot of questions. Goals, where are they going to come from? Goals, even in the final, maybe they looked like, maybe if we had some goals, we could have done better against Forge. And the fact that they lost one of the few guys who was, Brian Wright and Baloo Tablet, guys who are scoring goals. That's a lot of pressure on Salter, on Malcolm Shaw, who is also, he stays, and he was very good last year. Maybe a Jean-Anil Assis at, just 18. Can he step up after a year of getting familiar in the league with Cavalry? Now he's on loan to Ottawa. That's a big ask on those three players to really step up, because we know Ottawa is going to be such a tough team. Like, they're tactically so solid. They've got such good players in their spine. It's just, can those attacking players click? Because they're going to need those goals, because they need to turn some of those draws into wins, especially with the rest of the league getting so competitive, and they're not a secret anymore. And the goals are going to help them not, get over the fact that teams are going to play them a lot harder this year.
Yeah, I'm excited for Salter. I think this could be a fit similar to Ongaro at Pacific. It's a need for both clubs. These are both proven goal scorers at this league. Really excited to see what they can do. But Alex, there's a question mark around the next club we're going to talk about who is going to score goals for them. And that is going to be Valour, because just got some nice stats for you guys. Last season, Dyer, who's moved on, scored 9 goals. Sean Rea, obviously, who had a big season for them, goals and assists, but he scored 5 goals for them. Regi scored 3 goals. All 3 of those players are gone. Even Akio, who scored 2 goals, obviously he left a little bit earlier in the season. But it leaves them with pretty much no goal scorers on this side right now. How worried should Valour fans be about this upcoming season? Do you see any promise in there, or are you genuinely concerned of how this team will get on with these big players who left the club?
It's a huge ask. And I think it's going to be a big year for Phil DeSantos in particular as head coach, because I thought he did a great job of keeping his team organized and disciplined. They were tough to play last year, and you could see when it clicked at the end of the year and they kind of got all their pieces. This is like a tough team. And obviously they lost some pieces. Nassim Mekidesh moved, Dyer, Rea, Jonathan Sirois, who, again, I think Rayan Yesley in goal might be one of the young players to watch. So keep an eye out on him, because he looked very good last year. Like, it's something where they did well to replace a lot of those spine players. They think, you can also look at Abdou Samake, Jordan Haynes at the back line. They should be fine defensively, which is good. That's a Phil DeSantos team. He's always going to be very good defensively. He's going to be disciplined. But yeah, you have to look at goals, because Dyer was so key, and when he was out of the lineup, they were struggling to score goals as well. When Sean Rea, he was such a big part. And you look at someone like Anthony Novak, great goal scorer, but will he get service? He's more of a number 9 that's going to need service. He's not going to go out there and, make things happen on his own. And that's going to be the big thing for Valour. It feels like they're betting on a lot of young players, and maybe who knows what they will be able to pop off. But it's just something where Phil DeSantos is going to have his work cut out just to keep that organization they had last year with all those faces gone, while just finding goals when, his entire offense was gutted.
Yeah, Dyer is one of my favorite players to watch. It's great to see him move on, but it's going to be so difficult for Valour and Novak. It's just not a like for like replacement. It's going to be very different service that he's going to get, a different type of player, and we'll have to see if he's able to find the back of the net. He is familiar with this league. That is one big positive, and he does show that he can score goals. So we'll have to see there. All right, Alex, it is time to save the most intriguing club for last, and that is the new boys on the block, Vancouver FC. Now, usually with an expansion club, there's not a ton of expectations, but when you go out there and sign probably one of the biggest profile managers as well as players that the club has ever seen, that raises some eyebrows, being like, what can this team do? Now, Gail Sandoval is a big signing. This is a player who's expected to produce at an elite level in this league. And Asheen Gopi, if an MLS club went and signed this guy, they wouldn't blink an eye. These are how big of profiles these two names are. Are they enough to carry an expansion team like this to potentially the playoffs come the end of the season?
It was a huge sign of intent, and it's why it's so fascinating to watch this Vancouver FC side. Because look, it's an expansion team. Doesn't matter how good your team is. It just takes time to gel. You're going up against teams like Forge, who've been together for 4 years and have played at the Azteca together, won championships. It's hard to come in as a brand new team and gel, no matter how good your team is. And I think Vancouver has done a good job of making some sneaky signings across the board, but I think the big thing you need with an expansion team is coaching, and I think the fact they tick that box is huge. You look at Atletico Ottawa just as the easy example. When they first came in the league, they brought in Mista. It was his first job. It was a big ask, and maybe there was times where you wondered if a bit more of an experienced manager. They get that in Carlos Gonzalez in year 3, and look how far they go. The fact that Vancouver comes in right away with Afshin Gopi, who's coached some huge clubs like. Some people might know how big Persepolis is in Iran, but they made the Asian Champions League finals many a times. They're one of the top clubs in Asia. He's coached the Iran national team. He's coached some of the biggest clubs in China. He's been an assistant at South Korea, LA Galaxy. I just think that sort of experience, that pedigree, is huge. Just because you're coming into a young league and you have a young team, he's going to be able to form, shape, really give this team an identity and be disciplined, which you need as an expansion team. And then the other important thing with Sandoval, sometimes as an expansion team, you're going to defend a lot off the ball. You're not going to be used to playing in possession. That sort of stuff really takes time. The fact that you have just a firecracker is really the way I'd look at it. The wild card in Gail Sandoval, huge. He's 27. He's a number 10. He comes with over 200 games of pro experience, including 100 games in Liga MX alone. There's someone who's won a CONCACAF Champions League with Chivas. He was, one of the Liga MX Rookie of the Year when he came in as a youngster. He's still in form. This isn't someone who's fallen off. He went to the A-League last year, still had, 5+ goals and assists for Wellington Phoenix. The only concern is he hasn't played in almost a year, but I think it's something when he gets his legs under him, the fact that they just have that je ne sais quoi, he feels like someone who could, in an instant snap of the fingers, take over a game. Those two factors will help them get over some of those expansion growing pains. Because look, there's going to be some rough days. There's going to be days where their tactics just aren't ready, where players are showing their inexperience, but having an experienced manager and an experienced star like that goes a long way.
And it will get fans behind this team right away, and I think that's a big thing when you put in a statement being like, hey, I know we're the new kids of the block, but we've seen it happen in other sports as well, and in this sport that the teams can come up with a surprise, and that's exactly what Vancouver FC are hoping to do, which leads us to the last question here, Alex, before we go, and it's just a simple one. It is, who is you can kind of answer it whatever way you want, your dark horse maybe / a club you're really exciting to watch. For me, it's the same. I've talked about it already. I've probably made it clear. York United are going to be just the team I'm very intrigued to watch, because like I said, I think Martin Nash has this project exactly where he wants it. He's got his star guys who've been here from last season and can show that they can score and produce, and then just getting those depth pieces. Really like everything that this team can do, and I think that they will be the dark horses this year and have a big push, and they're also going to be the team that I'm very excited to watch. What about you?
Yeah, I think for me, it's probably just going to be, Pacific. Because I think, look, let's not kid ourselves. I think we know Forge are the favorites. They're the team to kind of beat, but I think Pacific could make a fun push with some of the pieces they've added. They've got a good mix of youth, and an experience that should make them a fun team to really, make that race towards top 5, top 4, all that, all that more interesting. So I'm excited with Pacifics. When they were on last year, they were very fun to watch. So the fact that they shored up some key areas makes me very intrigued to see what they can put together. Because it feels like almost, with all the aftermath of Vancouver FC, new team in the town, BC, feels like people are almost forgetting what's going on in Pacific. And I'm sure they'll be eager to prove that, there's a new club in BC, but for now, Vancouver FC has to first live up to what Pacific has done over the first few years, which includes a championship.
And that is all the time we have for on this big CPL storyline video. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know down in the comments who your dark horse is or what club you're most excited to watch. And as always, if you enjoy this, be sure to drop a like, drop a sub. We'll see you soon. Cheers, friends.